Train the muscles, not the joints. Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you about things that I wish I knew before I competed in natural bodybuilding. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you, and it might surprise you, is that some promoters are prone to corruption. I know, surprising, right? Crazy. Never knew it. So yeah, when I first started competing, there would be promoters that sometimes would reach out to you, or you'd basically sign up for a bodybuilding show and you talk to the promoter, and some of them were great. Some of them were great. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them were really good. And then there was other ones that would tell you a lot of stories about how they're there for the athlete, how they're there to promote the athlete, how they're going to get you out there, how they're going to make sure there's TV coverage in the show, that all the people are going to be there, the seats are going to be filled up to the rafters, and you're going to get a lot of exposure. So it's worth it for you to spend that money on competing with their organization. So you go there, and then you show up and you can see that the theater's falling apart. The drug testing is not necessarily reliable. And at the same time, there's only 30 people in the audience and 20 of them you brought with you. So this is a typical sad story that's going on in a lot of bodybuilding shows and fitness shows right now, is that the industry itself has become a super profitable industry to make money off the athlete, but not off of the audiences that are produced from watching the athletes. One example is, I went to this one competition that was horribly promoted. So there was nobody in the audience at all, and it was a really big show, according to the promoter. There was one particularly dodgy moment that my girlfriend at the time noticed, where one really big name natural bodybuilder got taken backstage, and it looked as if he skipped the polygraph test. Now, I can't say for sure or not, so that's why I'm not going to mention this person's name or anything, but what I'm going to say is that this happens sometimes, because what happens is when somebody is famous and they come to a show, the promoter sees this as an opportunity to promote their show. So say this person's in magazines, say they've got lots of TV coverage or whatever's going on in that person's life. This person brings an interesting opportunity to promote the show. So by saying this person is natural this or this person is natural that, with this federation, it actually promotes that federation. So now that promoter starts to make more money because of the exposure he gets from that particular athlete. So sometimes some, okay, not all, but some corrupt promoters will bend the rules because of this, and therefore they're thinking business first, but not integrity, right? So this is one thing I wish I knew. I wish I knew business was king, especially with some people, and that even though there wasn't a lot of profit to be made in natural bodybuilding, there were a lot of snakes in the grass just looking to take your money and to take advantage of any sort of person coming along that wished to compete. So this is a big problem, and this is something that I wish I knew in the beginning stages of competing, because I would have saved quite a bit of money and a lot of effort off going to bodybuilding shows that really offered absolutely no benefit to my career. All they were was a financial drain on my resources at the time, and wasted a lot of my time. But that's about it, honestly. I would have been better off being a professional tiddlywink player, or joining a knitting contest, perhaps professional painting, maybe dog walker. Dog walking would have been a good idea. Maybe a professional dog walker, maybe there was a contest for that somewhere, and I think that would have been more reliable and possibly give me more credibility in the entire fitness industry. Professional cat rider or cat equestrian, that might have been good too, because it worked for He-Man. He had Battle Cat. So there's a possibility that this could also be a sport, and I think because it's new, we could probably start off with some sort of good paradigm where the promoters are not corrupt. I think that would work. These ideas are gold, really. I'm just coming up with gold. I'm just like gold out for you guys all the time. I mean, I'm just giving you all these great ideas. I don't know what you're doing with them. I don't know what you're doing with them, but I'm telling you, this stuff just keeps coming out. You're welcome. Okay, the next thing I wish I knew before I competed in natural bodybuilding is that there's no money in it. There was never any money in it. So there were some people that supported the career, some people that I given shout outs over the years and stuff that helped me out when I was competing. But at the same time, the fame or the exposure, let's put it that way, the exposure that came with competing was not in alignment with any sort of financial feasibility. It was very hard to sustain a career as a natural bodybuilder. And so you had to have some sort of side business where you're personal training, whether you're owning a gym or a vitamin store or something like that. So that way you are promoting that business, really. You're not making money from the sport itself. So when I first started off, I was trying to find a way to make money from the sport itself because I loved training and I loved competing. But because of where I lived also, that made it harder, right? So if I wasn't willing to move down to LA, then of course you weren't going to get any sort of opportunities. And of course, I'm a Canadian, so moving down to LA was an impossibility, because if I moved down there, then there would be work visa type issues and all this kind of stuff. If Donald Trump was in office, I just would have been another person thrown over the border because I was illegally in the country. But the bottom line is that it just wasn't a feasible sort of option for me at that time. And even if I did go down there, there were a lot of people that were struggling in the fitness industry trying to make a living, but they weren't really making a living. So when I first started competing, I was glamorized around the whole thing. And I thought that, oh yeah, because the magazines have these people in them, you know, there are certain athletes that seem to be making it. I was assuming that they would make money from professional fitness modeling and by competing. And of course I was wrong. When I competed in 2001 in the WNBF Natural Bodybuilding League, which is one of the best leagues, I would say it's one of the best federations. Their testing is great and everything. The world natural bodybuilding champion, I believe, was making $5,000 to $6,000 US if he won the entire title, won the overall, right? So that means most people would spend, you know, their $1,000 or $2,000 on hotel and accommodation, and basically in flying there, you know, all that kind of stuff. Just the travel expenses alone were at least $1,000 to $2,000. And you go and win a show, and then you maybe make $5,000, $6,000 if you won the show. So that means the other 100 athletes were making pretty much nothing or less than nothing, or the top 3 were making, you know, maybe $500 or a couple $1,000. But there really wasn't any money that was sustainable. You couldn't really say, okay, I'm going to take this vacation, work my ass off, starve myself to half to death, and do cardio every day, and then somehow it's going to be all worth it because I'll be able to live off that income that I made from that contest. That wasn't happening. Now, the third thing I wish I knew, and I don't know if it would have changed things, because you know, there was a certain glamour around being in magazines and stuff. But the third thing I wish I knew was that the fitness industry screws the fitness models over big time. I mean, if you're in the acting industry or you're in the professional modeling industry, you get money for being on covers of magazines, or you get money for being in movies. You get residuals and royalties, and there's a union around it, and there's some sort of legitimacy around it, right? Where when you are in the fitness industry, if you get the cover of a magazine, you only get $200. Like, there's no $10,000 or $5,000 for the shoot. It's only $200 that you get to be on the cover of a magazine. This was true for all the magazines, even the Muscle and Fitness back then. So if I would have known that, I probably would have changed my business model and said, okay, well, maybe, again, I have to take some sort of steps in order to make sure that I make income from being on that cover of the magazine. So basically, the way people were monetizing their fame was that they would get contracts or endorsement contracts with companies that want them to represent their products because they had a certain amount of fame that was built from being on the cover of magazines. But the money wasn't coming directly from being on the magazine itself and being paid by the magazine company, right? So that's something I wish I would have knew. I think it might have enlightened me a little bit. Probably would have disappointed me a lot at that time, but it would have enlightened me about what you should be really striving for in the natural bodybuilding industry, and whether the competing and going down to LA was really worth it in the first place, right? I probably should have become a singer. I think a singer or something. If some moose come, then we know I should have done it. Voice like an angel, angel of suffering. Knowing what I know now, I probably would have become a promoter. Maybe a promoter would have been a good idea, but then some of those promoters, the honest ones, were actually losing their shirts on the show too, so maybe that would have been a good idea. Another thing I wish I knew before I started competing in natural bodybuilding was that if you won a show, it didn't necessarily give you any opportunities. So you might win a show. It doesn't mean that automatically you're marketable. It doesn't mean that a company's going to approach you and offer you some sort of sponsorship or endorsement. It doesn't mean that anything's going to happen. And I found that sometimes the opportunities that I did get were more about just hanging around the right location, but had nothing to do with competing itself. Sometimes competing offered you an opportunity, but most of the time it was just about being in shape and being in front of the right person, like the right cameraman or the right photographer, right? So I wish I knew how to streamline my effort more at that time in my life. So now it's a totally different age. Now we've got the social media thing going on. Everybody's got a camera. It's a much different sort of business model now. But back then I wish that I knew that competing didn't necessarily equate to success. It really had nothing to do with it, especially from a natural bodybuilder point of view, because natural bodybuilding didn't have any money in it, in that sport. So you could have got just as far ahead just modeling in magazines and got just as much of an endorsement contract or some sort of opportunity from doing that, just because the exposure was what made you marketable. It wasn't about winning a trophy. So the main thing is that if there's no audience, then there's no marketability, and marketability is what creates opportunity. So I didn't know this at first. I did it by accident when I started doing the magazine stuff and everything. But the fact is that marketability is what's going to create opportunity, not necessarily winning a show. The gladiator is only as great as the arena in which he or she wins. So if you're competing in some like Mr. Parking Lot 2018 or whatever, then, you know, maybe that doesn't really hold a lot of credibility or marketability. You can see this in today's society, or in, you know, any sort of thing. It's not the people that are the smartest or the brightest or the best. Sometimes it's about the people that are the most popular that have the most opportunities given to them. So, yeah, I didn't really know that stuff back then. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people are listening to people's advice that are not really qualified to give it. This is not the case right now, though. This is not the case. Like, I'm pretty qualified. I'm pretty confident. Right, guys? They're all nodding. They're nodding. You can't see the people, but they're nodding right now. So what did I get out of competing? Well, that wasn't all bad. But now the reason why this video addresses a lot of the career aspects of natural bodybuilding is that I find a lot of people get into competing because they want to make a living for themselves, or they want to make it sustainable, which is fine. Wouldn't it be great if you could make your hobby or your main interest in your life or your passion also your form of employment, right? So I understand why people would be seeking this, but really what I'm pointing out is that in the sport of competitive bodybuilding and competitive fitness, there are a lot of people that are leveraging this desire in order to tell them falsehoods or create false expectations. So this is something to bear in mind. If you're going to compete, there's a lot of good reasons to compete, but if you're looking at making it your source of income and stuff, I think that there's a lot more effective ways to make your passion your income. Now, that said, if you want to compete, if you're just passionate about competing itself, or if you want to get on stage, I think it's a good thing. And one of the great things about competing for me was that I really learned a lot about the body. I learned about what it took in order to burn body fat. I learned about what it took in order to stick to a proper diet program, and I learned the results of different types of diets and so forth. So each competition was an intense learning experience for me. So it really helped me pass that learning on to clients or people that I was personal training at the time. So if you use competing as a way of learning about your body or learning about how it reacts to exercise and to nutritional programs and so forth, it's a great way to do it. It's a great arena to figure out what works for your body and also what may work for other people. In that way, it can be an educational process. And if you use it like that, then definitely competing can be a worthwhile endeavor for you, right? But like I said, I wish I knew about the other seedier aspects of the sport and the seedier aspects of some of the promotional things that were not necessarily true that were told to me at the time. And of course, you live and you learn, and that's it, and you move forward. But yeah, if you want to compete, go ahead. I think it's still a great hobby. And if you want to follow your passion and your hobby and everything, I'm all for that. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this video helps you out a little bit, understand what it was like for me anyway. And if you need to get hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. And thanks a lot to the patient supporters. Take care for now.